Hello and welcome back to El Podo, the Primera RF show, where we take you down to the third tier of Spanish football to tell you about all the fun things that happen outside the top two leagues that we know and love. It is our final episode of the season. We finally know who will be playing Primera RF football next season and who got promoted through the playoffs, which we'll talk to you about shortly. It's been a mega season. We've had lots of games, lots of goals, lots of sackings, lots of drama. It's been absolutely fantastic. And first of all, I'd like to start the show by saying thank you to you guys at home for tuning in your masses this season, because it's been really a pleasure to tell you all about Primera Ref this season. And a double thank you as well to Tom Morgan Charters, who joins me this evening to talk about this final match day of the season.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about one specific game, but we will be talking about both games covering Sabadell, Zamora and Celta Fortuna, Ponferradina.
Yes, we shall. Yeah, I think definitely, but both high-scoring games, as I'm sure we'll come on to shortly. But I think there is maybe one scenario there where we're happier with the result than the other one. Also, obviously, to say a massive thank you to Liam Bambridge too. Let's not forget, for his brilliant work this season too. And obviously, he was hot stepping it on the Spanish Segunda scene on Saturday night after Malaga got promoted to La Liga. Just have to get that in there. I am sorry,
you did, didn't you?
but it shows you as well. And again, just to pick this up as how great this division is, the fact that we have three sides: Racing Santander, Deportivo de La Coruña, and Malaga, who are all in this league. You know, sort of like for two of them 2 years ago. For Racing, it was just over 4 years ago. The fact that we've got these three historic clubs who were in Primera Ref not too long ago going into the top tier shows how much quality there is in this division and how it can be a great reset if you are one of those, giant clubs who do fall into this division. You can get back out of it, can't you? And you can go on to bigger and better things, can't you, Tom?
Yeah, like you said, people think like Primera F is sort of a dumping ground, really, but it's a good place to sort of clear out the decks, reset, and just go again, really. And evidently, it's worked for the likes of Racing Santander, Deportivo La Coruña, and your club Malaga.
Vamos, let's go. Yes, very, very exciting. So, like I say, if you have been relegated into Primera Ref for next season, it's not the worst thing in the world. It is the best thing in the world, potentially. And all those teams, obviously, are coming up into it too. And all that are remaining from this season as well. It is all to play for next season, but we're not quite there just yet. Let's get into some news very quickly, Tom, before we get into those games. We've had a few more managerial changes, departures, arrivals, etc. And we'll start in Torremolinos, where there has been a buzz of activity this week. First of all, with the announcement of a new sporting director. He is a face that we are aware of on this podcast already because he is former Marbella coach David Movia. He was in Marbella for a short time, but still a good time, maybe, in his view. He's now just moving up the coast, which I think we mentioned last weekend. However, he's looked to make a bit of an instant impact, and he's announced a new manager today after the departure of Carlos Alos 24 hours ago. Aitor Martinez is appointed the new coach, who we might recognise from his time with the likes of Atlético Sanluqueño, amongst others as well. I think he was with Real Avila last season, Tom, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so he joined Real Avila in February in Grupo Uno in the Segunda Ref, along with our newcomers, Deportivo Fabril. They just missed out on the playoffs by 2 points in a very tight group. He was only in charge for 11 games. He won 6 of them. And he's also been manager of Atlético Sanluqueño as well for a month for the start of the 24-25 season, with 1 win in 6 games. But I think what they're sort of aiming for is a coach that has got a background in youth development, as he's had long periods with Malaga and a bit of a period in Betis in the youth setups. And you can see that sort of Torremolinos are going to try and be a development club, trying to develop talent and sell them on, or getting bigger clubs to trust them with their own talent.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And being in the catchment area that Torremolinos are, it's not a bad idea, to be perfectly honest. And like you say, if you can prove that you have got that ilk, and I think David Mavia has also got a streak like that in him as well. So I think
David
Torremolinos are
Cabello.
yeah. They're definitely looking to set themselves up that way. However, if you are going to be trusted, and I'm going to hop from managers to transfers and they'll go back to managers, if you are going to be trusted with the next generation of stars, you need to bring in the right people in the dressing rooms, the right people with the right amount of experience, and they do not come as experienced in Primera Federacion football than Dione, Tom. Signing Promeldense, obviously, he's not going to go up with Barragan's squad for next season. He's staying in Primera F, which I'm sure we will be very, very happy about. But the leading goal scorer for this division has got another season in him, and he's in Torremolinos. That's a canny signing, isn't it, for Torremolinos?
Yeah, it's a brilliant signing, and he sort of enjoyed like living in that sort of area when he was with Malaga a few seasons back. I think he was itching to get back into the area, and yeah, he sort of knows his level. Like he knows he can perform well in this league, and I think he just wants to enjoy football really instead of stepping up into the Segunda division and may not perform.
Yeah, I think he scratched that itch with Malaga, didn't he? And I made a good punt at it as well. Let's not forget in Malaga's first season back in, and it took him a little while to sort of get back into the rhythm of Primera football last season with Eldense, but he was a really big part of getting them promoted, as champions in Grupo Dos this season. I think he goes into obviously Torremolinos as well, who have a vacancy for a leader in the dressing room as well after Pito Camacho left the club alongside obviously the likes of Fran Gallego and the other Camacho, Aitor Camacho, I think it was. So
Alejandro.
Alejandro Camacho, beg my pardon. So he has got a job there. He's going to go in there and fill that vacuum that's been left. And like you say, hopefully he's going to be a good influence if there are these raft of youngsters who are going to come into Torremolinos to help them survive another season in Primera F, or maybe even go one better. We never know, do we? Just to bounce back to the manager changes then, Ude Orense were obviously one of the promoted clubs into the Primera Federacion via the playoffs. Obviously, we lost Orense CF. Ude Orense took their place. Their manager, Borja Fernandez, he will not be in the Estadio Oculto next season. He's traded in Orense for an hour trip up the road or 45-minute trip up the road to take over the reins at Lugo. That is an interesting signing for Lugo, to be fair, because ordinarily they would possibly go for someone a bit experienced, but like they did with Iago Iglesias last season, they're going for a Segunda Ref promotee. Is this a good move for him? Is it a good move for Lugo? Tom, what do you think?
Well, yeah, he's got 2 consecutive promotions with Ude Orense, and you got to say he's not going to turn down Lugo, who did spend big this season / last season, and failed in their objectives to get into those playoff spots, which they were on the right track until they dismissed Iago Iglesias and they got worse. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how he does with a bigger budget and a better pool of players.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that as well, because I think with Lugo, obviously their aspirations are well known. They don't want to be in the third tier; they want to be a second tier club, and in the corridors of power at the Ancho Carro, that is very much the objective. And I think when you can see the pedigree that Fernandez has got, you would certainly put them up there. And I think I was speaking to you earlier about sort of if the magic line which we're yet to see drawn across the Spanish Peninsula goes the right way. In one group, there could be a group that doesn't necessarily have the likes of a Tenerife, if you catch my drift. There isn't a huge club that's going to drop into there. I think obviously you've got the likes of Real Zaragoza that will fall into the eastern side or the southern side, whichever way you want to look at it. But from a Lugo perspective, they'll be in with the likes of Ponfe, probably Cultu, probably Merida, Pontevedra, etc. So there isn't a clear team there that you would want to lick for automatic promotion like we did last year with Tenerife. So for Lugo, they've got to look at that and say, well, this is our chance. If we are happening to be in the weaker group potentially, where there isn't a huge dominant club, we could be well within a shout there, couldn't we?
I wouldn't say the weaker group, but I think it's more evened out and competitive group if it does happen. Because like Merida will be one of those clubs that will be looking to look at that automatic promotion place. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting if it does fall that way.
A very political answer, that, Tom. On a day when we lost our Prime Minister, I can see Mr. Morgan Charter's probably taken the top job there. If you can't beat Alex Fitzpatrick to it first, though, we're all getting our hats in the ring for that one, aren't we? But yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, the more competitive group is probably definitely the way I would describe it. And I think Lugo, if they can get this right, if they can get the recruitment right this summer, I think there is maybe a couple of players that they need to shift from the deadwood ranks, as we call it. And I think they will be competitive next season in what will be a very interesting Grupo Uno or Grupo Dos, depending on which way it gets cut. Just a couple more player signings or departures, we might say. Obviously, on this podcast, we all know that we are fans of Juanjo at Unionistas, especially our very own Liam Banbridge, who has one of his shirts, I believe. I was expecting to see him possibly go up into the Spanish Segunda, and maybe this was sort of the inclination with this signing that he's made. He's joined Zamora in the last few days, who obviously were in with a shout of getting promoted, but obviously will be staying with us next season. This is a decent bit of strengthening from the Zamorans, isn't it? Even though they will be in Primera RFEF next season.
Yes, it hasn't really been officially announced yet, but all the sources are pointing to that he's definitely gone there. As we're going to point out in our sort of analysis of the game, he adds legs to that Zamora midfield, which is desperately needed. And yeah, I was a bit disappointed that he didn't get a crack at Segunda Division, because I think he'll cope quite well there. But I'm quite happy to watch him again next season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He belongs to us. However, one player we won't be getting to watch next season is that of Pontevedra's starman, Alan Ribeiro. He is signing for Sabadell. Now, I want to make the assumption here, Tom, that this was probably arranged before we knew what the result was of the playoff final, because it happened fairly quickly after that result was finalised. But he's going to be playing in the Spanish Segunda next season. He's obviously had a fantastic season with Pontevedra. I think this is his first season at the third tier level as well, if I recall, but he's bouncing straight through just like Sabadell, and I think he adds a good bit of dimension to Sabadell. Really, I think he's quite a canny signing alongside the strikers that they've already got, and it'll be interesting to see whether the likes of Godoy and Joel Priego stay in Catalonia, or whether this is a replacement. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Godoy was only a loan from Barcelona Athletic, and yeah, I think it's pretty much more of an upgrade, really, with Alan Ribeiro going there. And he can also sort of play in midfield as well. So he's got that sort of versatility about him. And he's just an absolute pest in the box. Like, centre-backs do not like challenging him. As we've seen with most of his goals this season, he just seems to pop up with a header, or he can hit from long range. He's a trick of all trades, really.
Yeah, and I think that lends itself, sort of brilliantly to Ferran Costa and his system, isn't it? We've seen that so much from Sabadell this season, especially on the road where, they've got the backs to the walls. They do like to make a real menace of themselves. And again, we'll talk about that shortly, but I think he's a good fit for Sabadell, and I think he's a low risk gamble as well, so to speak, because, he might not be the superstar standing that they need, but he'll be a very decent squad player, and you'll know that he will pop up with a vital goal here and there, as you said, Tom. So we'll definitely watch his career with interest if you are tuning into the Spanish Segunda next season. So let's get into some football, Tom, because we had two fantastic games this weekend, starting on Friday night at the sold-out Nova Creu Alta, which, again, brilliant to see. I know we've made quite a few I want to say rallying calls to Sabadell fans to fill the ground this season. Watching some fantastic football, and the last two playoff games, they've certainly answered that call. Worth noting as well, Tom, that there was a huge Zamora following here as well. Bearing in mind it's a 17-hour round trip across the country basically to get there on a Friday night. That's not bad, is it?
Yeah, it's really impressive the amount of the hours of that road trip that they've put in, and unfortunately it wasn't rewarded with the result. But even the home fans, as you saw at the end of the game, they even went over and applauded them. It was really nice to see that.
Yeah, and these are two very classy clubs in that ways, and there's no animosity lost here. And in this game, obviously Zamora 1-0 ahead from the game at the Ruta de la Plata, and I think Sabadell started this game very much in the same vein that they did with the Real Madrid Castilla game, knowing that they were behind, knowing that they needed to get something done early. And I tell you what, 18 minutes in, there's absolutely no stopping this one, is there, Tom? This is an absolute worldie from Javi Lopez Pinto.
Yeah, it sort of comes from a corner, it's played short, and Zamora sort of unaware, and Lopez Pinto just picks the top right-hand corner. No keeper is stopping it. It's just like me playing FIFA many years ago, holding that R1 button, just putting it into the top corner every game. But yeah, brilliant goal to start.
Yeah, it was an absolute beauty, wasn't it? And like you say, beating, Ferran Sobron is not an easy task. Looking a bit like Gabo Kirali in the kit he was sporting as well, sort of like black shirt with grey. I want to say they were bottoms, but they might have just been long socks and short combo.
Yeah, I think they were just long socks and short combo.
But yeah, definitely harked back to a bit of Barclays Manera goalkeeping at Selhurst Park. And then after that, obviously, the whole place erupts, doesn't it? You get the full force of that Sabadell crowd who were bouncing off their feet because they've equalised, on aggregate. They're 1-0 up ahead on the night. And then for me, it's sort of like it gets quite scrappy after that, doesn't it? Especially in the lead up to half time. Zamora start to then grow into the game. And, they see an effort from Lasada. He bullies his way through the Sabadell defence. That comes off the post. Not long after that, they get a penalty shout where Quique Marquez is brought down by Yuri, FBS, and the ref decides not to give it. And then there's that point where also Zamora, from a corner, hit the post again from a very close angle. I actually felt sorry for Zamora for a while because there is only so much you can do in football, isn't there, when the chances come your way. And unfortunately, sometimes they just don't go in. But the momentum was really with them for a large portion of this game, wasn't it? And in front of that crowd, that sellout crowd at Nova Creu Alta, that probably deserved more reward than they got.
I probably would say Sabadell were the better side in the first half. They defended with confidence, and Zamora didn't really trouble them really until the second half. Yeah, Fuali wasn't tested, and before mentioning Sabadell, Zamora playing well in the second half. Got to mention Uri and Quadri in that midfield, absolutely bossing it, sort of dictating the tempo and the play. And Quadri's reading of the game, putting the pressure on, being a constant ankle biter, which I'd hate to play against. And his physical endurance is incredible. And I think it's a safe bet to say that he tops the running charts in this game. And yeah, Zamora came out at half time and attacked the game with a bit more purpose, especially in the first 15 minutes. And like you mentioned, they hit the post and Lasada's had a chance. And then the penalty call as well, which for me, I didn't think that was a penalty.
I was going to ask you that. What did you think? Because I can see the arm going around him from Yuri, who, by the way, as far as glow-ups go, this new long-haired bun beard look, really working for the man. He's clearly got his eye on this move to Segunda and being the poster boy for Sabadell next season. The arm obviously goes around Quique Marquez. Marquez sort of falls to the ground. But the thing that annoys me about this is that, yes, I get the angle was tight, But as far as Kike Marquez is concerned, he's demonstrated this season that he can score from anywhere. If he gets a shot off there, he's at least testing Fuoli, isn't it? And that's a golden chance for me. So if I'm a Zamora fan, or I'm Oscar Cano, I would prefer to see Kike Marquez stay on his feet there. And the fact of the matter is, there isn't enough in it for me for it to be a penalty. I think he's gone down looking for it. Those are the kind of margins that have possibly cost Zamora in this game, haven't they?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said there. Uri does get his arm sort of around, but it's very minimal. And Kike could have easily carried on because he had the beating of Uri and could have got easily a shot on target.
Yeah, or even being able to pull it back and find Lasada or something like that. There were so many options, weren't there? And I can see why the appeal is there to possibly utilize some of those dark arts, as we say, to try and win a penalty to make it a bit more assured. But I just think in this game, when you're already drawing and the momentum's with you, a goal then would have absolutely silenced the crowd. It would have probably deflated the Sabadell team, and we could have been talking about a completely different result here. But he's obviously a very good player. He scored some absolutely belting goals this season, so we won't hold it against him. These are heat of the moment decisions, aren't they? But I just think it could have been so much better for him there. And then, like we say, Zamora continue with the chances. They go chasing this eventual, possible winner, and then as we get into the final knockings of the game, cue the most mental 10, 20 minutes of added time you've ever seen. Bearing in mind at this moment, we are 1-0 on the night. We are 1-1 on aggregate. We get this first goal in the 89th minute from Sabadell. It's Eneko Aguila who grabbed it in the 89th minute. Just as the ball bounces off Sobran's post, he is there sort of jogging on the spot, and he just has to tuck it away. And then the whole stadium obviously booms up again. That is then kind of like tempered by the FVS check. But I've got no doubts here that he was definitely onside, Tom. But at this point, you think, right, well, it's game over. That we don't need to play the rest of the game. Let's go back to being, defensively astute. Let's try and keep the game. That doesn't happen, does it?
No, because obviously Zamora looking to get back into the game. They've pushed forward, and Sabadell pounced again with I like to call Mr. Endurance Quadri for the third goal in the 95th minute. He nicks the ball off from midfield, and he just runs into the massive gap that's left behind, and finishes off coolly and sparks off the first pitch invasion.
Yeah, it's a very cheeky finish as well, isn't it? I thought it was a toe poke to begin with, but actually he kind of does hit this with a bit more finesse than I given him credit for. But I think you're absolutely right. Especially in sort of like this timings, the amount of running that he's done, he is, rightly or wrongly, you wouldn't have forgiven him for maybe just holding the ball up, would you, at this point? But he's gone for it. He's seen his name in lights, and he scores an absolutely brilliant goal to make it 3-0 on the night. And then we're not done there, Arthur. Even though the game is pretty much over at this point, Sabadell then go into full chaos mode, grabbing a fourth. It's some awful defending from Markel Lozano, isn't it? Who I can see what he's trying to do. He's trying to reset the ball and he's trying to nod it back to Sabron, but he just doesn't get enough power on this header, does it? And it opens up for Xavi Moreno to break through, go one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and he makes it 4-0, and that is job done. And this is one of those games where, like you say, if you look at the scoreline on the board at the end of the 90 minutes, you would go, oh, well, that's a comfortable Sabadell win. That hasn't been the case here, hasn't it? But that riot in the last 15, 20 minutes means Sabadell go up with the biggest party that they've had at the Nova Creu Alta, and a brilliant result, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was just great scenes to see two pitch invasions, one even though the game hadn't finished yet. And then obviously the fourth goal happened. And then the second pitch invasion and seeing all the fireworks going off. And like I said, the home supporters going over to the away fans and clapping them, and also the away fans supporting their own players and not giving them stick and trying to sort of look after them. And got to say, I've been trying to look back at the history of Primera RFEF, and I think Sabadell are the only team that have got promoted after losing their first legs, the semi and the final as well.
Oh yeah, no, that wouldn't surprise me either. Usually, it's a death knell to some teams to even lose the first leg because, and this is what we say about both games. Obviously, they were both finely poised, weren't they? But they knew what they needed to do. Sabadell just completely let off the handbrake in both games as well, and got the result on the night here. Which is why I think the game plan from Ferran Costa was so well executed by Sabadell. He knew when to go, he knew when to stop, he knew when to apply the right pressure. The players, as you said, gave absolutely everything on the pitch to get the result that they got on this evening. And I think, over the course of the season, as much as Zamora probably also deserved to be one of the promoted sides, consistently Sabadell have been in that top two, that top three of Grupo Dos. And, as a team that was only promoted from the Spanish Segunda last season, probably deserve to be in the Spanish Segunda as well next year. How do you think they will do next year? Because obviously we've seen, some of the promoted teams that go on to do bigger and better things. I'm probably looking more at hopefully a Ceuta kind of model that they've got this year rather than say like a Cultural Leonesa, for example. But do you think Sabadell can add something to the Spanish Segunda?
Well, they were going to be the sort of only Catalan representative in Segunda until obviously Girona's gone down from La Liga, which I think sort of helps them to recruit the right players, because who wouldn't want to live in Barcelona? And Sabadell was literally about half an hour on the train away from the centre of Barcelona. I'd like to think they will stay up, and got to give credit to Ferran Costa, 31 years of age, like only a few weeks younger than me, has achieved so much already. Like, he's got promoted with Marenza to Segunda Federacion, and missing out on the playoffs the following season. And then he did have a 10-month spell at Andorra, which didn't go too well, but he's done well to get Sabadell promoted in his first season. And even though they're not going to be in Primera F, I will be still watching them in Segunda Division.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's still very much on my hit list of places to go because, they are a unique entity in that sort of like Catalan Barcelona football scene, aren't they? Because they're not necessarily a barrio club like, San Andreu or Europa, or obviously they're not a behemoth like Espanyol and Barcelona, but I think they offer a unique place. I think they'll be a great addition to the Spanish Segunda as well. And let's not forget, this is a really big club in terms of a rich history. Copa del Rey finalists. They are, they were an ever present in the top tier during the 60s and certainly in the Spanish Segunda for a long period of time as well. So it's great to see them back there. Hopefully a few Bristol Rovers fans, if you're listening, will be there to watch a few games next season as well. So congratulations to Sabadell for their promotion. As for Zamora, Tom, obviously very unlucky for them this season, but it's still an improvement on where they were last season after being promoted into the Primera F a couple of years ago. This is incremental growth from a club that has got very big ambitions, and I don't think they'll be knocked by this one. And sort of similarly what we were saying with Lugo, they'll have aspirations of thinking, well, this is a competitive group, but we've got a good chance of finishing out on top next season if they can keep the core of this squad. And obviously they're already looking to strengthen it with the likes of Juan Hay. They've already tied Oscar Cano down to a new deal next season as well. There's no reason why they can't easily go again and give another good account of themselves, can they?
Yeah, and like you said, tying down Oscar Cano was vital, really, because he's been so impressive since he's joined the club. I think they're probably one of the teams with the most points since he joined. So me and Liam went to Zamora versus Unionistas and watched them lose 3-2. But it just, the ground there is a fantastic ground, and you can see that they could potentially be a Spanish Segunda side if they carry on this sort of progress into next season.
Yeah, and I think when we've seen the crowd swell, the more attention that they've had on them from the local populace, gives them, maybe that swell of support that they need to go on. And as we say, do one better next season. And obviously, we reiterate there is only one automatic promotion spot out of each group or so, one chance to win it without having to go through this rigmarole again. And, if they can keep, as I said, that core together, I can really see Zamora giving it another chance. And automatics, should be the aim for them. So we'll look forward to talking about them more next season, and hopefully we can get to the Estadio Ruta de la Plata once again for another visit, Tom. And hopefully we can go to the club shop officially, as you are. If you're watching on YouTube, you are sporting one of your 3 Zamora shirts. Hopefully there'll be some new ones next season for you to get your hands on as well. Right, let's go into the game that we don't really want to talk about, but we have to talk about because, it is a playoff final. Celta Fortuna for Ponferradina 1. I didn't really have this scoreline in my mind when I first sat down to watch this game. I don't think we'll dwell too much on it, but I tell you what, I must say, being held at the Abanca Baledos, the home obviously of Celta Vigo, obviously good for them to get used to that environment because it's going to be a place that they're going to be playing plenty of football next season, because I don't think the B team's ground is even big enough to be classed as a Segunda stadium. I think they can play some games there from time to time, but I think the onus will be on to be at the main ground in Vigo. And actually quite a decent crowd for this one, Tom. Obviously, the president came out and said, come and get behind the boys. We'd really love to see your support. And, I imagine a record-breaking crowd for Celta Fortuna that we saw.
Yeah, saw. I think the official attendance was 18,007, and included in that 18,007 was the club legend that we both love, is Iago Aspas.
Oh, good old Barry.
Yeah. But
should be at the World Cup, surely. Really, he should be at the World Cup. But no, he's backing the boys, isn't he? And and also obviously to mention too, part of that 18,000 was a cracking following from Ponferradina as well. They took, I think it must have been 1,000 fans at least to this game. And as Liam predicted, they were sort of up in the God section up there. However, I think at the start of this game, they wouldn't have cared, did they? They were there to support their team, and they did a fantastic job in doing so. Possibly not for much reason, Tom, because like I said, I didn't really see this result coming. But as soon as you saw the first Celta Fortuna goal, it kind of felt like the writing was on the wall, wasn't it?
Yeah. Say with one thing I have noticed with Celta Fortuna in these playoff games is that the position of Hugo Gonzalez. So when he plays in the away games, he plays sort of like in the left midfield, whereas the home games he gets pushed sort of basically on the left-hand side of the front 3. And my God, what a player he is. And before we start praising him, he is not from Galicia, he's from Valencia. So but
yeah, not one of those homegrowns.
Yeah. and Celta Fortuna only made one change to their lineup to sort of battle the impressive Borja Vasquez by bringing in a sort of more of a defensive right-sided player to combat with him. And then Nafty being Nafty, unchanged, sticking with Keita as the false number 9, which he did sort of switch during the game with Borja Valle.
Yeah, I think from this one, you really get to see the quality of these B teams sometimes when they're in this kind of match, and I think you're absolutely spot on. The way that they implement, the strategy around them, especially a player who is as talented as Hugo Gonzalez, and it's really important that you mention obviously his connections to Valencia, because not too long ago he was not a regular, but he was a bench warmer for the first team, which from where Valencia Mestalla are in Segunda Federacion shows you his qualities, and he's been an absolutely brilliant player for Celta Fortuna this season with 18 goals in 36 games. He's had 9 assists. He's had frequent appearances with the first team, and it wouldn't surprise me, especially with Celta Vigo. Did they get European football again for the next season? I can't quite remember, or did they just miss out?
Yeah, they did. I can't remember which one it is, either Conference League or Europa League, one of them. I think it's the Europa League because Getafe got the Conference League.
That sounds about right, yeah, because of that extra Champions League spot for Real Betis, wasn't it? So it would have moved down one. But again, when you're in those kind of competitions, you need to have your rotation, and it wouldn't surprise me to see the likes of Hugo Gonzalez in the around the first team next season to support that too. And especially if he's also dipping in and playing Spanish Segunda football, it's going to be a no-brainer. But the way he sort of like broke through the defence here, and as you said, playing on that left-hand side of a front three, he seemed to switch over to the right for this one, but he sort of like just powered his way through, and that little drop of the shoulder to go around Prieto shows his qualities, doesn't it? And it's a really cool and calm finish, which again, it gets those fans going, doesn't it? The 18,000 or so Celta Vigo fans in there. It sets the tone, and I don't think that Ponfe really managed to get back into this game after this goal had happened. It all seemed to sort of swell and swish one way, didn't it?
Yeah. So talk about the first goal was the first real chance of the game, really, and it was a brilliant ball from Andres Antonon, guided over the top of Herman Novoa, who was pulled out of position by Hugo Gonzalez, and he was in a losing battle against him for pace, and dropping the shoulder, beating Prieto, and finishes well. And then not long after that, Gonzalez does the same thing again with dragging out Novoa out of position, sees him run into the box, and then shot saved by the ever-present Prieto. Everything was going through Gonzalez, and the only sort of chance that Ponfe had in the first half before the goal was Borja Vasquez lashing one over the bar, and then just before half time, they got their equaliser, didn't they?
They did, yeah. Very much a case of anything you can do, I can do better from Borja Val, who the ball kind of falls to him. I'm not going to say fortunately, because obviously he's been found at the back post with a lot of space, but the way he just sort of like sidesteps his defender and then slots it into the bottom corner is a really cool finish. And to be honest, at that point, I thought that's the perfect time to score. If you're up against a bunch of kids as well, let's not forget, that's a real knocking blow for them, and the sort of blow we've seen from Nafty in a few games this season as well, where they do like to score, late on in the halves from time to time too. And for me, that was the opportunity for Ponfe. That was the opportunity for Nafty to come in at halftime and say, right, you're back in this now. You need to go out there and execute the game plan. You need to not give them as much space as you're giving them now. You need to be quicker and more direct with your passing. And it just didn't happen, did it? It just felt like Ponfe didn't have the oomph in them that we'd seen in previous games. And in this second half, it was sort of more rinse and repeat, wasn't it? You had the likes of Alvaro Martin and Hugo Gonzalez sort of like playing it at their own rhythm, sort of like, nicely jogging around and dictating the play. And then it all comes undone after just an hour of play. A silly decision in the box, which I would forgive him for this because, it's clearly not malicious, but you just can't go down in the box like this when you've got, a 6-foot striker lurking on your shoulder, can you, Tom?
Yeah, Ponfe can have no complaints about it. And the Barrena has been brilliant since Nafty's been in. And the same with Novoa, but they both didn't have great games. And under Barrena, undone by another Antonon pass, which was to Alvaro Marin in behind him. And he decides to bring him down. Silly challenge, because he could have possibly stayed up, recovered his position, and forced Marin out wide to make it more difficult for him.
And to be honest, I don't think he counts on him being there. I think this is Uribarriena looking to sort of like slide across the ball to stop the pass more than anything. But I think once you commit yourself to going down like that, and you're not fully aware of what's happening around you, you open yourself up to a lot of risk, don't you? And I think at that point, the way that he's caught Marin, and completely unintentionally, I may add, he then can't get to the ball, which means, for all intents and purposes, from the letter of the law, striker is brought down in the box where the defender has not won the ball. It's got to be a penalty, and like you say, I don't think there can be any complaints from Ponfe on that, can there?
Yeah, clear cut. Nothing to argue with.
No. And then obviously, the man of the moment, Hugo Gonzalez, steps up once again. Brilliant penalty, this. I do love to see, a slow stop penalty, if that makes sense, sort of like where the run up is sort of like paused before he picks his corner. And I think Prieto does commit himself maybe a little bit too soon for me on this one, but a excellent penalty nonetheless to make it 2-0. And then the win sort of gets wrapped up in sensational style. And I know that we've had a lot of praise for Bernard Summerway this season, who he looks really cool on this pitch as well. Like, I was trying to come up with comparisons to the way that he moves around with sort of like freedom expression, and I couldn't really find any peers that I could compare him to, other than sort of like a Bernardo Silva type player, isn't he? Where he's just, brilliant at finding that little gap, exploiting that little bit of space. And when he opens himself up here and just bends this shot into the bottom corner, with cool, calm, and collectiveness, it's a real finish and shows you the quality that Celta Fortuna have got as a B team, doesn't it?
Yeah, literally just before they get the goal, Nafki tried to make changes and they didn't work. They didn't create anything. Ponfe got outrun and outmaneuvered by Celta, whilst Freddie Alvarez did introduce his speed demons of Bernie Suma and Herman Miller, which caused Ponfe more problems because Ponfe tried to push forward, which left them vulnerable to a counter-attack, and Sumer was there to make them pay.
Yeah, and they went to check on FVS for an offside in this, I believe, in the build-up, didn't they, when Ponfe were dispossessed? But I think he's quite clearly onside, isn't he, from where he stood? And like you say, you don't get many better finishes. It's not easy to beat Prieto at the better times, but this one into the bottom corner is a really cool finish. And then things just go from bad to worst, and there's clearly a bit of heads gone here from Cortez. He throws himself into a completely unnecessary challenge here for me. The lad's not going anywhere. He's stood out on the left-hand side on the touchline, and it's a very late one. He then gets sent off a straight red, which means obviously he'll miss, whoever he's playing for next season. He'll miss, the starting of the season as well. And then Celta Fortuna's fourth goal comes straight from this free kick, doesn't it? Sort of like it's played into the box. You can see that maybe some, Ponferradina heads have gone down potentially, but then Adria Capdevila, who I believe is of no relation to the more famous Capdevila that we know, slammed home from close range, 4-0, 4-1, and it's a big win. Celta Fortuna are promoted to the Spanish Segunda. It was as easy as that in the end.
Yeah, like I said, they were beaten by the better side. They sort of Ponfe ran out of legs in the second half, and Celta just kept on going, and the frustration of the Ponfe players got the better of them. And even before that Cortez red card under Barrena, possibly could have had a red card before that, literally a few seconds earlier. But yeah, out of the filiales, if one had to go up, I'm glad it's Celta Fortuna.
Yeah, I would echo that. Like I say, there seems to be not that I like them, but there just seems to be something more likable about them compared to, say, like Real Madrid Castilla or Atletico Madrileño, for example. But that means 2 B teams in the Spanish Segunda next season, Tom. That's not been achieved since 2011, when we had Villarreal B and Barça Athletic in the same division. 15 years ago now. There has been some times when B teams have replaced other B teams, but this is a 2 in the second tier. How does that make you feel? Is this a good thing that some people have maybe said it is, or is this a bit crap that two sides are in that league?
I'd say it's obviously positive for those bigger teams that have filiales. Their players will get better, but for me, I'd like to see proper clubs in there who put their sweat, blood, and tears into it, whereas a filiale don't really. And I hope that's the only 2 that will be there, and they'll drop down next season.
Well, that's going to be the interesting point, isn't it? Because, like you say, as these filiales strengthen, and we saw at the beginning of the season that in both grupos, the top spending clubs, 2 or 3 clubs in this case, were all the filiales, and they were signing players from other Primera F sides to make up their squad. And clearly there was something about that where it's not just for development purposes only, is it? And if I am to be, with some journalistic rigor and add some balance, you look at Real Sociedad B and Celta Fortuna. They are the two B teams, maybe alongside Villarreal B, who can progress as many as of their prospects through to the first team. They do have a clear pathway to being part of that first team squad. So again, do we read into the fact that the more successful transitions into the first team seem to be the teams that do well out of this level and get promoted? Who knows? But still, as much as I wouldn't want Primera F to be filled with filiales as we've seen this season, I do think it probably should be capped to the third tier, because I think, like you say, there are big clubs who, I'm not saying they've taken the place of, but they are getting riches upon riches, essentially, because obviously they get a stipend for being in the Spanish tier, roughly worth around 10 million euros now, to compete in that level. And then, like you say, you get into all the ideas of players who can transition between first teams and second teams, blah, blah, blah. All those headaches that we've suffered this season, we're now going to see more in the Spanish Segunda. So hopefully, I don't know, I wouldn't want to see them, I would want to see them both come down, but then hopefully we lose a couple more filiales for them to replace. As for Ponfe, obviously, the bridesmaid once again, they got to the finals last season and were knocked out by Andorra in the playoff final. History repeats itself. We were worried about them going into this season, and I think sort of those worries were confirmed for a little while until they brought in Nafti, and obviously he changed the momentum. Do you think we should have concerns about Ponfe next season going again, or do you think it's maybe a bit more of an even keel for them this time? And is the key to that keeping Nafti in position, or do you think we might see him leave?
I think it all depends on what he wants to do and what they're promising him, really. I know the Ponfe fans not happy with, I think it's the sporting director, as Chris Pigeon, our Ponfe fan, told me. They wasn't really impressed with like the January signings, apart from Carlos Calderon and players like that. But there's already rumours of them signing, I think it's Kekala from Real Villas Industrial, who's a very good player. So there is some spark at the end, light at the end of the tunnel, but it's I reckon it's going to be down to Nafti wherever he stays or goes.
Yeah, and I think it's whether the project is of interest to him as well, because he hasn't really stayed in one place for a very long time before, and obviously he's only sort of circa 6 months into this job. And again, in the same vein that we talk about Lugo, the same vein that we talk about Zamora, Ponfe will probably be in that clump. The more and more I talk about it, the more and more competitive I'm making this league. They will see that possibly as an opportunity again to go again and maybe get that top spot as well, if they can get the basics right. But they've got to keep hold of this core of players, haven't they, that have got them to this position, got them into another playoff final, because what happened last season when they lost so many players and lost a lot of quality, it took them a lot of time to get it back together, to gel again and to get them back into this position. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at El Torreón across the summer, and hopefully, they will go again. And obviously, from our perspective, we get to talk about them again. And we do love Ponferradina as a club. It is one of those cracking institutions as well. So selfishly, I am also happy to see them remain in Primera REF. And that was that. That was the El Pozo second season, our full first season of reporting at clubs at this level. It's been an absolute belting one, hasn't it, Tom? A really high quality season with shocks, surprises, results, talent. It had everything, didn't it?
Yeah, it was very rare that there was a dead rubber game. I enjoyed watching 99% of the games, apart from the one I previously mentioned between Celta Fortuna and Ponferradina. But yeah, it's had everything this season. And even though we are still very unsure about FES, we're trying to be sort of balanced about it. It gives everyone something to talk about as well.
Yeah.
But hopefully it will improve as well.
Yeah, I think it's got its chance to evolve next season, hasn't it? But it's a damn sight better than VAR. That's what I
Yes.
think personally. But yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with us over the course of the summer, because we obviously will have no Primera football to talk about until August time when the season kicks off once again. A date for your diary, obviously the 30th of June, where in Plaza Colón in Madrid, they'll be doing the full fixture releases for La Liga 2, and most importantly, Primera Federacion. We've got 14 new sides to talk about next season, so we'll try and bring you as much news as we can as we get affiliated with them. Tom, I'll say thank you very much to you. Joining us halfway through the season, you've been an absolutely brilliant addition to El Podo. If there is a person that watches as much Primera Federacion football as you, I would be surprised. You are rivaled only by our very own Liam Banbridge at that level, I believe.
Yeah, I say it's most weekends of me and him message and see how many games we've watched each, and it gets quite close. But obviously, he goes away nearly every weekend to Spain to watch football. I don't know how he gets away with it, but gotta love him for it.
Yes, no, absolutely. You've got to love that hustle. And hopefully we can join him for a few more games next season. Certainly from my perspective, I want to make sure I get out there as well. And if it wasn't for my job, I'd also try to be competing with the amount of games you come. But obviously we don't have a way to watch these games at the moment through certain sources. Let's put it that way. But we'll persevere, and hopefully Liam's chat with Alejandro at Merda maybe has some vibrations in the corridors of power at the REFF, and gets us an international TV deal so we can watch all these games like we did with FEF TV. Obviously, I want to say a big thank you to Liam as well. A brilliant season for him too. I think he's been to tantamount amount of games, but he's also done fantastic interviews. He's got behind the scenes. He lives and breathes all things Primera Federacion, Segunda Federacion, as well as the Spanish Segunda too. So thank you to him. But most importantly, thank you to you guys, the listeners at home. You've been absolutely brilliant. You've been tuning in your droves, and I really hope that we've managed to convince you that the third tier of Spanish football is one of the best, one of the most competitive out there, and it is definitely worth you popping your head into a third tier ground when you are next over in Spain. So I'll say thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Until next season, we'll see you again. Hasta luego.